Welcome to episode 4 of All Reading Matters, because it does. This is the third part of my look at books that I read in 2024, according to Goodreads. Not sponsored by Goodreads, I should point out, although they should. My Goodreads account kept a list of the books that I read last year, so I thought I'd go through them. You may find something you want to read, or you don't want to read. So, let's kick off with a book by Shashi Tharoor, a book called Inglorious Empire, What the British Did to India. I think you can probably see where the book is going. This is a tale of empire. It's not so much empire. It's more of an invasion. We invaded India. We took over. We raped the country for 200 years. We demolished the population. We let people starve deliberately. We let people descend into poverty. We treated them appallingly. We were hideously racist. We stole the wealth of a nation for 200 years. That's what this book is about. It's not about the glorious British Empire. It's about the hateful things that we did to India. All the shit that we stole. It got my blood angry up every few pages. It's one of those books that really is quite difficult to read, because you do just get so angry and think, my God, we call ourselves civilized. You know, this was the glorious British Empire. It was a disgusting episode. It really is something to be ashamed of. So there you go. Shashi Tharoor, Inglorious Empire, What the British Did to India. Hayley Mills. For me, has always been one of the film stars that I've absolutely adored. First time I ever saw a film called The Family Way. She was young, and she was gorgeous. I was always jealous of Hugh Bennett, but she was John Mills' daughter. She was a child star, and she made the transition to being an adult star. Typically English. She came across as being really lovely. I've always sort of rather adored her throughout the years. And she's, still going, still doing stuff. She's had a long and successful career. This book is an autobiography called Forever Young. And I was surprised how much I didn't know. That's something that I quite often find when I read a book, which is why I read books. Because you think you know a lot about someone, but when you actually read the book, you find out that you actually don't know as much as you thought you did. So this book, how she was treated, not so much by Disney. Old Uncle Walt actually did treat her very well. It's her accountant who was the people who should have been looking after her interests were the ones that screwed up right royally. So all the money she made from her Disney movies as a child, that went to the tax man. She never made anything out of that. That all just went straight to the tax man, because she was paying something like 98% tax. Then the marriage and like I said, there's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't know. It was a thoroughly enjoyable read, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who is into movies, particularly Hayley Mills, British movies. It's a great read. In this particular batch, there are a couple of my other books. First one here is a book by Professor Ian Plimer. It's a book called Green Murder. And it's all about climate change and the green agenda. Now, I know that some of you listening may think, well, wind farms and solar panels and electric cars, yes, they're going to save the planet. No, they're not. This climate change thing. Oh, you're a climate denier. What does that even mean? Climate is not a hoax. Climate is changing. It always has. Carbon dioxide is not a greenhouse gas. It is not a pollutant. Thinking about carbon dioxide emissions, it's a bit of a ridiculous way to go about sustaining the planet. All this sustainability stuff, it's all rubbish. I'm sorry if you all believe it, but it's rubbish. Wind turbines and solar panels are not going to save the planet. Electric cars are not the environmentally friendly thing that you think they are. You buy an electric car in the UK, it's been made with electricity generated by coal-fired power stations, probably being transported to Europe on a diesel-powered boat. The cobalt and all the elements made in the battery come from child slave labor mines in Africa. Wind turbines, they are totally and utterly unrecyclable. They will end up in landfill. Same goes for solar panels. It's all a big, well, it is a hoax. Climate changes whether we're here or not. For example, if you accept that human-related carbon dioxide is going to kill the planet, it is at a certain level now. Okay, there are times if you look back through geologic history where the carbon dioxide level has been higher and lower than it is now. So the question is, if the carbon dioxide that is being recorded now is all a result of man-made interference in the world, then who was responsible 150,000 years ago? Same thing goes for, the planet's getting cooler, it's getting warmer. Well, you don't really know, do you? Because it was global warming, then it became climate change. Is the planet getting hotter or colder? Make up your mind. As Ian Plimer says, it depends when you measure it from. If you measure it from the Little Ice Age, then it's probably warmer now. But if you measure it from Roman times, it was actually a good few degrees warmer then than it is now. So, that's all subjective. It depends on when you start the measurements from as to whether it's hotter or colder now. Professor Ian Plimer is an Australian geologist. He is very knowledgeable about his subject matter, and this book, Green Murder, explains it all very, very clearly, very succinctly, and it also explains why none of the stuff that all these crazy governments are doing is going to make a slightest bit of difference. That is the hoax. That is the Green Murder. The next one on my list is a book called Fissman's Fraud. The Rise of Canadian Hate Scientists by Regina Watteal. This book is an interesting little read because Regina Watteal is a statistician and she knows an awful lot about numbers and sums and stuff like that, which I have to say, I don't. This book is all about how the Fissman of the title created an entire fictitious bunch of statistics to prove that in Canada the way they were attacking the COVID lockdown scenario was all supported by the science. And the only problem was it wasn't. They faked all the numbers, they faked the statistics. As, we have come to realize a lot of the stuff that happened during the COVID thing was not exactly honest. There was a lot of information that was massaged, left out, manipulated. You weren't told the truth. That is quite clear. And this book goes into all that and uses the statistics of Fistman against him, basically. It's a book that I doubt that you'll find on many platforms. I'm not entirely sure it's even on Amazon. But it is a great read, if you can find a copy. Fistman's Fraud, The Rise of Canadian Hate Science. You don't think of Canadians like that, do you? No, I know. But then again, Justin Trudeau. Enough said. Bret the Hitman Hart. One of my collection of wrestling books. I should point out Firstborn Girl Child, when she was younger. Okay, let's start from the beginning. When I was a kid, back in the 70s, I used to love watching the wrestling on a Saturday afternoon. Kent Walton from Halifax Town Hall, you know the kind of thing. Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks, Rollerball Rocco, Mick McManus, Jackie Pallow. It was all just good fun. And I remember my mum saying to me when I was a kid, she said, "Oh, you know it's all fake, don't you?" I said, "No, it's not fake. It's real. It's real." It's not. They're all friends, you know. She said she used to go watching wrestling when she was younger. In the ring, they'd be the bad guy and getting hit with brollies and what have you. And then after the show, you'd see them running for the bus. They weren't terribly injured and stuff. And I said, no. Then I, of course, in the 80s, got a satellite TV system and started watching American wrestling, the WWF as it was then. And Firstborn Girl Child used to sit with me and watch it. She became quite a big fan of it. And it's been funny because talking with her lately, she's remembered lots of things before she actually thought she remembered the stuff. It must have been just because she was sat with me watching it, you know. By the late 90s, the WWF had become quite big, and the battle with the WCW. Firstborn Girl Child's favourite was Bret the Hitman Hart. She absolutely loved watching the Hitman. After sort of like the turn of the century, the girls grew up and, went away to uni and stuff like that. So we kind of all drifted away from watching the wrestling, and, the wrestling has gone on, but we've sort of left it behind. So it was interesting to read Bret Hart's biography. Now, it has to be said, this is a big, thick book. There's a lot of reading in there. And, yeah, he does tell the truth. I have no reason to doubt him. He's very, very honest. And I think the important thing to remember about wrestling is, whilst the outcome and the storyline might be written, scripted, created, the action that goes on in the ring is real. Yes, it might be choreographed, but it is worked out to give the best entertainment, so that the people watching it genuinely do get to go, ooh, that's happening in the ring is real. What Bret goes into a lot of is, the people like himself, Mr. Perfect, Roddy Piper, the people who did work at it to become the best that he could possibly be, they, more often than not, made the ones who couldn't really wrestle look good, because they made up for their inadequacies. And yeah, we're talking about people like Hulk Hogan, not the best wrestler in the world, a big guy, but not a great wrestler. So the technical wrestlers, they had to make the show look good. And I guess that's what this is all about. So it's all about, there's quite a lot about the history of wrestling, because his family goes way back with his father Stu. He deals with all sorts of things, his career, Owen, his brother who died in the ring, also his relationship with other wrestlers, the ones he was friends with, the ones he wasn't friends with, and also how his career came to be an end, wrestling Goldberg. He's not very complimentary about Bill Goldberg, it has to be said. He also talks about the stuff that he's done after retiring from wrestling, and it's a really, really great read. It really is. It's a big eye-opener. A lot of the stuff that he talks about, I had no idea. Some of the stuff, yeah, you kind of you are aware of it, but a lot of the stuff was very new to me, and it's a fascinating read. If you enjoy wrestling, if you're not a wrestling fan or you have no interest in wrestling, then you probably want to give it a swerve. But for me, well worth reading. Bret the Hitman Hart, great book. More Than Likely. Clement Lefrene. Not a French village, just a pair of absolute geniuses. Dick Clement, Ian Lefrene. These two, a bit like Keith Waterhouse and Willis Hall, these are two heroes of mine. I mean, they are responsible for so much TV that I've loved throughout my life. From The Likely Lads through Porridge to Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, movie Still Crazy, which is one of my all-time favourite movies. These guys, they've just written so many great TV shows, films. I just absolutely adore their stuff. And this book, More Than Likely, is written by them both, and it's a really good read. There's loads of funny anecdotes and funny stories. They tell you things that you didn't know about how things came about, and like little inside stories about making of Porridge or The Likely Lads, all that kind of stuff. And it's a really great read, really enjoyable read. It's one of those books that you can pick up, and it doesn't take you very long to get through it, because you pick it up and you just keep reading it because it's so much fun. So if you like, and you are of a certain age and you like all those old TV shows like Porridge and The Likely Lads and stuff like that, this is most definitely a book to read. Absolutely pleasure to read. Dick Clement, Ian Lefrene, More Than Likely. One of the books that I reread last year was a book by the great crime novelist Walter Mosley. And this is a book called R.L.'s Dream. And the reason I picked that up is because I was moving some books around, and I came across this one, and I started, for some reason I picked it up and started reading the back of it. And I'd read it when it first came out, years ago. When I read it originally, I don't think I'd appreciated quite what I was reading. First published in 1996, so it's nearly 20 years since I first read it. And I wasn't as big a fan of and as knowledgeable about the blues then as I am now. So when I started reading the back cover and about what it was about, I thought, hang on a minute, I need to read this again. So I did. R.L.'s Dream is a novel about an old blues musician called Soup Spoon Wise. He's dying of cancer, he's old, he's on the streets of New York City, originally from the Mississippi Delta. He gets evicted from his apartment and gets involved with a young, volatile woman called Kiki Waters, who's from Arkansas. She's got her own troubles, her own baggage, and their relationship is basically the story. Kiki takes Soup Spoon, nurses him back to health, and the other part of the story is that Soup Spoon has memories of his brief but memorable encounter with the legendary Robert Johnson, R.L., of the title. So it weaves in the Robert Johnson story and the mythology that goes with that. It's an interesting read. Basically, Soup Spoon wants to tell his story through a series of tape-recorded interviews, and that sort of becomes his mission in life towards the end, to preserve the stories of the forgotten musicians, make some sense of his own life. It's very well done, particularly if you understand the blues and what it meant. Because the blues was hard life, there were hard times killing floor. And back in the 20s, 30s, once the Depression hit, a lot of blues musicians didn't make it. They gave it up because they couldn't make any money out of it because nobody had any money. And a lot of them went on to do other things for 20 or 30 years. It was only in the early 60s that the legacy of Robert Johnson was revived and this mythology sprang up about him, which may or may not have been true. A lot of the old blues musicians were rediscovered, and some of them did find a certain amount of fame. We got recordings late on from Son House and Skip James and people like that. But they had 30 years of nothingness where they'd been forgotten. They'd been working as janitors, and they had not been famous in their own lifetimes. They'd been forgotten. It was only when the 60s came around that some of them were rediscovered. The fact they were still alive. Robert Johnson wasn't. Maybe that's why Robert Johnson became so famous, because he wasn't around. But yeah, R.L.'s Dream is a nice little story, and it sort of, there's a counterbalance between 1990s New York and the 1920s, 30s rural South. It's very well done. It, talks about the problems of being old and dying in New York in the 90s, as well as being young and what it was like to be in the 20s and 30s and the blues. And so if you have an interest in the blues, it's a nice little story to read. It's all about the African-American experience in America. It's not necessarily like a lot of Walter Mosley's other stuff. He is known for his crime stuff, but then again he's written a few other books that don't deal with crime, so this is one of them. Yeah, if you're into the blues, Robert Johnson, all that kind of stuff, a nicely written book, then check out Walter Mosley's R.L.'s Dream. Another blues book from the Blues Collection. It was one that I actually bought because I was on Facebook one day. I was reading a post by Mark Harrison, a blues musician, about this book that he was reading. It's a book called Up Jumped the Devil by Stephen Calt, who is an American blues researcher and writer, and has written biographies as well as Skip James, Charlie Patton. I'm not sure that I can say that I particularly enjoy Stephen Calt's writing style. Although he is a good researcher and he knows his stuff, his writing style is a little bit... I'm not entirely sure what the word is. His writing style is a bit weird. His writing style isn't very sympathetic, but then again, he actually knew these people. So maybe he has reason to be the way he is about the whole story. Skip James, one of the originals from the Mississippi blues scene from the 20s and 30s. And in the 20s and 30s was undoubtedly an incredibly talented guy. Not a particularly nice guy, but then again, he had a traumatic childhood. He did not have an easy life. Being black and being in Mississippi in the 1920s and 30s was nobody's idea of fun. But also, he also was his own worst enemy in many ways, and a lot of the problems were of his own creation. But he was a very talented musician, there's no doubt about that. The songs he recorded have become classics. The whole I'd rather be the devil got my woman, that comes largely from Skip James.
As does I'm So Glad, which was made famous by Cream.
Now, the thing was, Skip James was one of these musicians who gave up. He actually tried to become a minister like his father. It didn't really work out. And then he sort of disappears for 20, 30 years, doing various jobs, moving around, being quite transient. Of course, he is kind of rediscovered in the 1960s, along with some of the others, but by this time he's had a tough life, and like many of them, alcohol had become the thing, and they were not the musicians that they had been. And the recordings of people like Skip James, Son House, they show that quite clearly. That said, it's still quite nice to have those later recordings. But yeah, this book, if you want to know about Skip James, his story, the Devil Got My Woman kind of blues songs, that all comes from Skip James. So well worth a read. Very good book. Not an easy read. Not an easy read by any means. Certainly, if you are serious about the blues, essential, in my opinion. The last one in this particular episode is Spare Prince Harry. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm not a royalist, I'm not a monarchist. I think we would be much better off without them. I don't see why we should support them, pay for them, give them any money whatsoever. I think it would be nice if they supported themselves and stopped living off people much, much poorer than they are. However, I did enjoy reading this book, which surprised me greatly. I wasn't expecting to enjoy reading it. And when I say enjoy reading it, do I mean enjoy? That's a very good question. It's a very readable book. I think he is quite honest, although I would have a caveat about honesty is all relative. But I do think that he's quite upfront. I didn't read the things and not believe the things that he said. And I did believe a lot of the things that he said about his brother and his father. You know, whichever way you look at it, it's an odd family. You might be a monarchist, you might be a royalist, you might love the royal family, you might be going out there, you know, waving your little plastic Union Jacks. I think we'd be much better off without them. I'm conflicted by this book. Like I said, I did enjoy reading it. I think it's a great read, and if you're curious about it, read it. It is a good read. Yeah, he comes across as being a decent bloke. He has actually been in battle. He doesn't mention whether he's able to sweat or not, like his uncle. So, you know, kind of, but then again, you've also got to take into account that he has lived a life of incredible privilege, and one that is totally unlike anything that a normal person would have to endure. And, you know, I'm not sure I have any time for all these people saying, oh, having money is a problem. Well, you should try living without it and see how much of a problem it is. If you've got shitloads of money, then you're going to be better off than somebody who hasn't. And as for his wife, I'm not a big fan of her. But then again, I don't know that what I know about her is because of the vendetta that the press have obviously got against both of them, whilst leaving William and Charles relatively unscathed. William and Charles are vile creatures, in my opinionation. It's a good read. I don't know that I feel sorry for him or feel any sympathy for him. Or having said that, his birth was not his fault. He didn't ask to be born into that family. I think he's trying to do the best that he can. And I think he did do the right thing by getting away from them, although he has been punished for that and continues to be punished. But having said that, he's still fabulously wealthy. You know, there's a limited amount of sympathy I've got for somebody who's that rich. I am looking forward to Spare Part 2. Would that be called Spare Parts? I don't know. It's well worth a read, that is what I would say. Make up your own mind. That is the end of this episode of All Reading Matters. There's one more part to come with the final selection of books that I read in 2024. So thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch, allreadingmatters@gmail.com. That is the end of this episode. And remember, all reading matters because it does.